You're listening to Home Sweet Home with Russ McClellan and friends. And here's Russ.
Hey, welcome back to Home Sweet Home with Russ McClellan, or What in the Heck is Going On show. Maybe that's what we should call it today. What the heck is going on? What has happened to people? You know, and I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I'm actually a very positive person. I believe in affirmations. I believe in meditation. I'm a yogi guy. I feel very lucky, I think, because, you know, at about that age where you've been doing something a long time, and I've been in real estate 30 years or so, you just kind of eventually mature, I think is the right word, and realize that all you know for sure is you don't know very much. And then when you're young and you don't know very much, you have the confidence that you know everything. Now the question is, what is generational intelligence? Is there even such a thing? I grew up, my dad was a hard-working guy. His dad died in front of him in Manson when he was 8 years old. His sister was drowning. My dad ran all the way down the street, as the story was told to me, in 1941. In 1941, my dad's sister was drowning at the little Manson swimming hole. My dad was 8. I think she was a little bit older. They're both passed away now. My dad passed away in April. But his dad ran all the way down the street, and he was pulling green chain at the time for a mill, so he had a lot of heavy clothes on, very hot day. Water's very cold. They assume he had a heart attack. So my dad, the reason I'm telling that part of the story is my dad grew up doing the best he could at being a great dad, and I believe he was the greatest of dads. And he did it by being positive. Well, I got really lucky. I grew up in a great town of Manson. It was, you know, sports was a big deal. Played hard, not a lot of worries relative to most people on the planet Earth that had it much more difficult than I did. But my dad was also pretty straight up about some stuff. You know, kind of had a code. Treat other people like you want to be treated. I remember getting in trouble one time at the elementary school, or maybe more than one time, let's not ask him. But there was a few times I might have been in trouble and maybe gotten a little fisticuffs here and there. But it was always about defending someone, not a bully. I was too little for that. But I remember getting bullied one time. Scared me to death, right? But this was on a playground. Older kids, if I'm gonna be honest, I think it was the kid's older sister. And if you want to be embarrassed as a young kid, get bullied by an older girl. That's worse. That's traumatic. Probably still need counseling. So one day, I don't think it was that situation, but something similar, I popped a bully in the mouth. Got in trouble. Little fisticuffs, kids, right? My dad comes up and he says, "What'd you do that for?" "Oh, I was picking on little Sally," whatever her name was. So he looks at the principal and he says, he was defending that little girl. I'm glad he punched him in the face. And then that was it, right? Like, okay, go home and, you know, just a weird time. It was common sense, right? Common sense. You had a responsibility, and sure, we stood up in the back of pickups. We rode motorcycles without helmets. We did a lot of things we shouldn't have probably done that were dangerous. That, of course, you know, you have to change once in a while. But I'll tell you what, my dad raised me in a way that I became very different than him in a lot of ways. My dad was a farmer, hard worker, every day, all day. He worked with me in real estate for 30 years, really became my best friend. But what was cool about it is I was a lot like him too. And what I'm really finding out that as the months have gone by, now it's going to be about April be a year. finding that I'm more like him now that he's gone than I've ever been. And I'm also finding and discovering at 50 something lessons that I'm just learning right now that he taught me maybe years ago that are kind of coming to the surface. It's a very strange thing for anybody that's lost a father, a mother, or a loved one. I remember a story about persistence that I wanted to share with you as it relates to getting through 2020 in maybe a humorous way. My dad was a cowboy. I often describe my dad as John Wayne, just smaller. He's an apple orchardist. He loved horses. So when I asked him at about 8 years old or so that if I could get a horse, he said, "Sure, let's go ride one." Well, little did I know he was going to take me to a rodeo and enter me into a junior rodeo and put me on a Shetland pony that had a flank strap. That was bucking out of a chute. And he's like, "Well, let's see how you like horses now." There wasn't a lot of abbreviation for that. So when you get in the back of a rodeo and you get on an animal and all his friends are around, you want to talk about peer pressure. It made standing up to bullies easy. And it's not like they gave you, full-grown horses when you're 8 or full-grown, Brahma bulls when you're 8. They gave you calves, like a little calf. But I'm telling you, when you're 8 and you weigh 40 pounds, it seems pretty big at the time. So he loved the idea. We had a travel trailer, a horse trailer. He got me a horse after riding a few rodeos. And then we started doing the barrel racing and the bull bending and the keyhole races and the, breakaway roping for people that understand junior rodeos. That's what you do, wear a little ribbon, catch the rope. I didn't do a lot of that, but I did all the other stuff and rode calves. And as I grew up, every summer, that's what we did. One rodeo to another rodeo. Had the little 19-foot Terry travel trailer, the Dodge Ram Charger, pulling it. And for 2 years, I rode animals, rough stock. Calves or steers, and Shetlands or, yearling horses. Got bucked off every time for 2 years. Every single time I hit the dirt. My dad, the whole time, to his credit, he was back there behind me, picking me up by my belt loop, setting me down on animals, psyching me up when I was getting scared. He'd get me down. And remember, this was no helmets, right? There was no helmets like they do now. That would be too smart. This was tough, straight up. The spurs, hold on to a rope, set on an animal. And what made it even more fun is that you really didn't have to breed bulls too much back then, or animals, calves, steers. They just used electricity. That's right. They just stabbed the animal with electricity, and it's a matter of voltage. It'll buck. So they'd ask your father or whoever was helping you get down an animal. Sometimes when people didn't have fathers or their other buddies or brothers or who helped each other too, they'd say, "You want to get the juice?" "Yeah." "All right, shock them. Shock that animal. It'll buck. That way you get a better score, you see." Well, my dad did a great job of talking me into it a few times. I saw some people very hurt, very bad, more than once. And I'd been hurt many times. But again, that first full 2 years, every time I got bucked off, he picked me up like I had just made the best ride in the history of rodeo. The last year I rode, which eventually I got out of it, and a lot of my friends stayed in it. It was a big deal where we grew up in Lake Chelan Valley. A lot of them became very, very good at it and professional riders. I got out about that time where I started discovering sunshine, girls, boats, water skiing. And, I had hay fever really bad. So going to a rodeo every single month, I just have allergy attacks every single weekend, I should say. It was just kind of like, man, I'd rather just, I worked at night. I remember, I don't know if on another show or this one, my dad, I worked for him in the orchard for a long time until he told me to get out of the orchard because I was too expensive. So I went to work at restaurants at night. There was a restaurant called Cats and Jammers. And the reason I'm giving you this little history lesson is the last year that I rode, I didn't get bucked off very much. I won a lot of buckles. I had I was pretty fancy. I'd throw my hat in the crowd. I did all the things that you said. And again, there were no protective vests or helmets or anything like that. The funny part about the first time that I rode though, so remember the first 2 years I got bucked off. The last year I rode almost everything, won most everything. But the first ride that I made to the buzzer, I think it was a steer. I must have been like 10 years old. It went out, sat down, and didn't move. Now you can get a re-ride if the animal doesn't buck, right? Well, this one got voltage and didn't buck. I don't know if it was old or hurt or what, but I had my hand in the air, my other hand holding onto the rope, and I was gonna ride it, and it just took about 4 steps and sat down. And there I am with my hand in the air, sitting on top of this steer. And when that buzzer rang, I jumped off of that steer thinking, yee-haw, threw my hat in the stands. And I swear, in hindsight, I look at it, I think all my dad's buddies that were looking at him like, I'm sorry your son has a mental problem. He doesn't understand the rules, does he? You know? And my dad, instead of feeling embarrassed that I was acting like I just won the Super Bowl at 10 years old, because I finally rode to the buzzer after 2 years, even though it sat down and didn't do anything, he picked me up and acted like I won the Super Bowl. Damn near started crying with me. That's the kind of dad my dad was. Well, I guess the moral of this segment is 2020 was kind of like that first 2 years of riding a steer and riding a calf, getting bucked off every time. And just as fast as you get bucked off for 2 years, you can make one ride, even if it doesn't look very good. And then you can start momentum in the right direction. When we come back, let's talk some more real estate maybe. Thanks for tuning in to Home Sweet Home with Russ McClellan.
Home sweet home, oh home sweet home, home sweet